Hello and welcome to the lecture 2 of this session. And in this lecture, we are going to discuss about Java's different versions and each version's key features. So let us start. So the first one we need to mention is the Java version 1, which was introduced in 1996 January. And its key features include AWT in event model, which means AWT is a graphic user interface which allows us to have buttons, combo boxes, everything in our code. We will discuss about it later. Next thing which we need to mention here is inner classes. Inner classes means Java has all the code in classes, and these classes can be having nested option. So these nested option classes are called as inner classes in Java. So that feature was introduced in one. And next thing is meant to mention is the JDBC. JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity, and it was feature was introduced in one. Next thing which you need to mention here is the RMI, Remote Method Invocation. Remote Method Invocation was introduced in this version, which is allows us to invoke methods from remote location. Next thing which you need to mention here is the JIT, Just-in-Time Compiler, which was introduced in the version 1. Now let us discuss about the version 1.1, or commonly introduced in February 1997. The key features include Java database connectivity, which means it will be able to connect to different databases using this Java connectivity tool. Next thing is to mention is math class. Math class provides all the mathematical operations and trigonometric operations. Everything is allowed in this math class. So we can, with the help of the math class, we can do the development. So there will be a lecture on the math class separately, so we will continue with this in this section. So next thing which you need to mention in this is enhanced IO packages. So the enhanced IO means input output operations. Input output operations was enhanced in 1.1 version. Now let us discuss about the 1.2 version. So the 1.2 version was released on December 1998, and its key features include servlets. Servlets means the server related technologies which will allow us to have server side code which is used in Java web development. We will not cover this topic in this tutorial. And next thing which we need to mention is Java 2D. Java 2D is has an package which allows us to have graphical operations such as drawing a circle, drawing a rectangle. All those operations can be done using Java 2D. Next thing which we need to mention is Java Swing. Swing is a enhanced user interface, graphic user interface, which was enhanced after AWT. So after AWT, which was introduced in 1.1, this is the 1.0, which was the Swing was introduced in 2, and it was enhanced to have more graphical interface features. Next thing which we need to mention here is the Javadoc templates. Javadoc means if you write a code, we need to have some documentation to the code. So to provide the documentation, Javadoc was introduced in 1.2. Next feature is collections. Collections are the set of to interfaces and classes which allows us to have complex data structures in our program. Next, we will have discuss about Java 1.3. This was introduced in May 2000, and the key features include JNDA, Java Naming and Directive Interface. Next thing is Java Sound, and last one is the program Java Platform Debugger Architecture. So these all the key features introduced in 1.3. Now let us discuss about Java version 1.4. So it was introduced in February 2002. The key features include assert keyword. Assert keyword is a keyword which is used to have assertions in Java. Assertions means if you want to check for a particular validation condition and throw a particular error, we can use assertions, and assert keyword is used for that purpose. Next thing which we need to mention is regular expressions. Regular expressions provides a way to check for particular expressions in a string. We can use it for validating a string and removing particular elements from string. All this can be done using regular expressions. Next thing which we need to mention is exception chaining. Exceptions can be chained in Java. So this was introduced in Java version 1.4. Next thing which you need to mention here is the new IO feature. New IO means the enhanced version of IO, and non-blocking IO was introduced in Java version 1.4. Now let us discuss about Java version 1.5. It was introduced in September 2004, and its key features include generics. Generics means it brings the generic programming in Java. It allows us to type to be passed as parameter in Java. This is a cool feature which allows us to have generic methods and generic classes. We will discuss about this in the generic section of our tutorial. Next thing which we will need to mention is enhanced for loop. Enhanced for loop allows us to iterate over a particular collection with more easily accessible form. For loop is available in Java, but the enhanced for loop is a new enhanced version which was introduced in 1.5. Next thing which you need to mention is auto boxing unboxing features. So Java has some primitive data types. So in order those primitive data types to be used in object concept, we have to use auto boxing concept. Auto boxing and unboxing will be explained later in this tutorial. Next thing which you need to mention is the enums. Enums are a set of values which we can give, and we can declare those similar values. For example, dates of a month or days of a week. These can be considered to be as enums. Next thing which we need to mention here is static import. Static import allows us to import static methods into static members into a class, which we will discuss in the later lecture. Next thing which you need to mention is var args. Var args means variable arguments. So in Java we can have a method. There are some types of parameters which are called as var args, which allow us to have multiple set of parameters as passed to a method. Next thing which we need to mention here is annotations are provides metadata to our code. It allows us to have specific metadata information about code, so that we can use this core information to process our class or interface or anything method. Anything we can process in a different way. It is used in framework design and everything. So next we will discuss about Java version 1.6. 1.6 was released on December 2006. Its key features include Java WS Web Services, JDBC enhancement of JDBC to JDBC 4.0. Next feature was pluggable annotations. Now let us discuss about the next version of Java 1.7, which was introduced in July 2011, and its key features include binary literals. Binary literals allows us to have binary values to be assigned to integers and all, with a special symbol and a binary notation. Next thing which we need to mention here is strings in switch case statement. So in switch statements, which is available in all other languages also, Java also have switch statement. So in the switch statement, we can give a string as a literal. That is a new feature was introduced in 1.7. Next feature which is introduced in JDK 1.7 is try with resources. So try with resources is a feature which allows us auto closable resources will be there in Java. So there are some resources such as scanners and readers. These resources can be auto closed. So this resource try with resource was a new and feature which was introduced in 1.7, which allows us to safely closing those resources automatically. Next feature is JVM multiple exception handling. So this feature is introduced in Java 1.7, which allows us to have a pipe symbol and catch those multiple exceptions one by one in a single line. So this allows us to have a good compact code for exception handling. Next thing which you need to mention here is the underscore literals. Underscore literals allows literals to be having an underscore in their declaration. So if a long number is there, So we want to separate those numbers by keeping an underscore. Java allows us to have underscores in literal values. So we'll explain this in the coming lecture. Now let us discuss about Java version 1.8. It was introduced in March 2014. The key features include a Lambda expression. Lambda expression is a functional programming construct which was introduced in Java version 1.8. We will discuss about Lambda expressions in our following tutorial. Next, we will discuss about functional interfaces. Functional interfaces are interfaces in Java with a single abstract method. We will discuss about this in the functional programming lesson in our tutorial. Next, we will discuss about is method reference. Method reference also is a syntax which allows us to shorten the lambda expressions. We will explain about method reference in the functional programming tutorial. Next, we will need to mention is default methods in interfaces. In Java 8, default methods was allowed into interfaces. And next thing which we need to mention is the Stream API. Stream APIs allows us to have a process and aggregate collections in very fast manner. We will explain about this in the Streams API lecture. Next we need to discuss is Java version 1.9, which was introduced in September 2017. It is bring about a big change in Java community. The first thing what was Java platform module system was introduced, which divided everything into modules. Java previously was not modularized, so after 1.9 everything was modularized. Next thing which we need to mention is JShell was introduced in 1.9. JShell is a pre-evaluate print loop, which means we can write our code in a single IDE editor and we can directly run and get the result from there only directly. So this is a feature is available in all other languages. Java introduced it in 1.9. Next thing which you need to mention is collection factory methods. Next thing which is Java HTTPS 2.0. So this is a new feature which has introduced which allows HTTP clients to be having in our code. We will explain this in the HTTPS section of the tutorial. Next we need to mention is process API enhancements. So process API enhancements means there is a process API which was previously available. So it was enhanced in the Java version 1.9, which allows more methods in the process API. Now let us discuss about Java version 1.10, 1.10 or 1.10. So next the version was introduced in March 2018. Key features include local variable type inference. So this allows us to have a new keyword which is called as var. This keyword allows us to declare variables without mentioning their type. This is a new feature which was introduced in Java version 10. Next thing which you need to mention here is unmodifiable collections which was introduced in 1.10. So these unmodified collections means these collections, for example, unmodified list is there. So list dot of a method is introduced in Java 1.0, which allows us to have collections without a feature of not a modifiable feature. Next thing which you need to mention here is garbage collection enhancements. So garbage collectors are certain tools which allows us to recover memory when while executing a program. Dereferenced objects will be collected back. This there was an enhancement for these garbage collectors in Java in 1.10. Next version we need to discuss is Java version 11. So it was introduced in September 2018. We can see that after every 6 months Java started releasing after JDK 9. So in this version was released in September 2018. So every 6 months there was a release of Java since after that. So now let us see the key features of Java 11. The first feature which was introduced was running Java file with a single command. Next feature which was introduced was new utility methods in the string class. So string class added new methods. Next feature which was is local variable syntax for type lambda expressions. So these are the new features which was introduced in Java 11. Next we will discuss about Java version 12. So this was introduced in March 2019. Key features include switch expressions, which means previously switch statements was there. Switch expressions is much more compact form of switch, which allows us to have arrow notation in switch. Also has introduced a new keyword called as yield keyword, which is also introduced in JDK 1.12. And next feature we need to mention is JVM Constants API, which was introduced in 12. Next feature, which is garbage collector enhancement. So new garbage collector enhancements were proposed in Java version 12. Next the version which we need to discuss is Java version 13, which is released on September 2019. Key features include enhancements for switch expressions. So enhanced switch expressions was enhanced in this version, and which was released in last version. There was a changes in the new version. So next thing which is text blocks. Text blocks allows us to write multiple lines of code, string literals in Java. So if we have a more than one line of string literal, we can use text blocks to represent it. Next thing which is introduced is renewed socket APIs. So socket for the communication client was enhanced in this version of Java. Now let us discuss about Java version 14. This was introduced in Java in 2020 March, and the key features include pattern matching for instance of operation. So instance of method was is the operator was there, and in this operator previously you have to cast and everything we have to do typecasting everything. So this is reduced in Java version 14. Next thing which you need to know is helpful null pointer exceptions. And next thing which is introduced is Java records. Records are certain feature new construct which was introduced in 14, which allows us to have an data collection which will allow data class which will allow us to hold some variables. For example, if you want to create a person and have person data, so this allows us to have a person data which is unmodifiable, and then which is which also has some getters and setters and all provided by the Java compiler. So we don't need to create our own code and make it complex. So this records allows us to have a key cool feature. Next thing which you need to mention here is switch expressions standardized. So switch expression was standardized in Java 14. Next which feature which you need to discuss is Java 15, which was introduced in September 2020. Key feature include records. Records was standardized. The next thing which you need to mention is collections and garbage collector enhancements. So garbage collectors was enhanced in 15th version, and next thing is sealed classes in preview feature. So sealed classes which allows us to have sealed classes and restrict the inheritance. So this feature we will discuss in the coming lecture. Next feature which we need to discuss is text block. So text block means that we already discussed this was standardized in this version. Now next version of Java is Java 16, which is released on March 2021. Key features include language enhancements. Language level enhancements was introduced. The next feature is improved memory management. So memory management Java internals was improved. So next feature is new packaging tools. A new packaging tool was introduced. Next thing which you need to mention is pattern matching for instance of was standardized in Java version 16. Next thing which we need to discuss is Java version 17. So this was released on September 2021. The key features include enhanced pseudo random number generator. So random number generator code was being enhanced. And next feature which is deprecated the applet API. So applet API was there previously, which was old version of Java, which is deprecated, which means it is removed from the Java version 17. Next it is deprecated, sorry, and it will be removed later. And next thing which you need to mention is pattern matching for switch. So in switch statements we will have pattern matching. Like for pattern matching, for instance of pattern matching for switch statements was introduced. So in this series, in this lecture, we will have discussed about the various versions of Java and how each versions bring up a lot of changes. It is very difficult to understand every changes and every remember everything. So this lecture you may not fully understand, but later in this after watching the entire series you can rewatch this video and you will understand little more this matter. So this is it for Java version history. Thank you for watching.